Better than coffee. Yep. You got a great run for not so early there. I have no idea. If I had a dollar for everything that showed up randomly in this around
In your what?
in my room or just
In your office?
I'll be a very rich woman. I'll be named the shit. This could actually be very consecutive. It could. Otherwise, I won't hear them on the side. It's my second historical building I've been in 3.5 years. There's a cute picture. Look at this.
Oh, I love that. Oh my God.
Shlomi's first birthday kiddish. So cute.
I mean, this microphone works too, right?
Okay, what time is it?
What time is it?
I'm taking this.
Gin and tonic. You're ready for a gin and tonic.
I drink vodka. There's no gin. It's not vodka.
I might even be ready for a tea time.
How's the baby?
He's doing great, Berkshire. Exactly, just like that. Oh yeah, you did.
Her husband's a judge.
Sorry, I'm talking about that.
Alumni stole it.
No, the 11:05. Do you want to give it 3 more minutes? 11:02.
Another minute.
All right.
And our camera's picking us up from up there. So, and it's nice. And like everybody, are we mic'd up?
Yes.
Everybody look up from the music. Look up from the music. Look out for everybody. Enjoy, smile.
So, how are we standing?
Not yet. Yeah, she'll use this. But
When you're ready. When you're ready. We'll hand it to her right now.
yeah, but not yet. Have her stand in the middle with the microphone.
Eve, can you come in the middle and I'll hand you that? Is that too much to hold? Too much.
Yeah, I'm gonna like turn the page. If I can put it on here.
Keep that.
Take it back.
Keep that where it was.
Oh, and you only need that.
Yeah, I can.
Thank you for all that.
Closer to the middle, so you can hear him.
Are you going to give me that one note there? No, I don't need every. I just need that first one.
I got you.
Amy, ready? Ready?
This is our moment.
Did I get a note?
Shalom, shalom, shalom. Shalom. You're getting so good at that. Shalom and welcome, Ma Tovu. How beautiful it is to be together, united on our historical 125th year anniversary. Here we are, Ma Tovu.
Mishkanotecha Yisrael, Ma Tovu, Ma Tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael, Vani berov chasecha, Avo beitecha, Eshtacha ve'echa kochecha, Be'yiratecha, Ma tovu, Ma tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael, Ma tovu, Ma tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Adonai ahavti, mehon bei נתתי לך, אדוני את רצון. אלוהים ברוב חסדך, אלוהים ברוב חסדך. ענני באמת אישך. מה טוב, מה טוב, מה טוב, מה טוב, אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טוב, מה טוב, מה טוב, מה טוב, אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. משכנותיך ישראל.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And of course, we have our own Lador Vador moment in our cover notes. With people of all ages singing together in beautiful harmony. Thank you for starting off our celebration today. And I'm Rabbi Chaya Bender. I hope that if I haven't met you yet, I hope we'll become best friends by the time lunch is over today. Everything has its own time. There's a season for everything under the sky, Ecclesiastes. As long as the days of the earth endure, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Genesis 8:22. Judaism is a religion in time. Sunrise, sunset, creation, revelation, everything turns around the sun and the moon in our tradition. And there's a sanctity in these cycles, evening and morning, ritual and rite, being able to make order out of a chaotic world. That Shabbat becomes an island in time. We hold Shabbat sacred apart from all else. We hold our Rosh Chodesh ceremonies apart from all else, marking the new moon and capturing joy and sorrow in the moon. Shavuot, we honor the Torah. Sukkot, we wave the lulav east, west, north, south. We say a prayer for earth's harvest, seeking blessings of abundance. Passover, every year we are reborn when the sea of reeds part, a season of renewal and freedom. And here we are at 125 years of Bnai Israel, marking our own time, marking our past and our present up to this very moment. But we also have an eye towards the sky, which is our future. And we will continue to mark time as holy, and we will continue to make every moment count. So as I said a couple days ago, so that 5 generations from now, all of our descendants will be saying the same blessing when they mark their ceremonies as we say Shechianu together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Adonai, creator of all, who keeps and sustains us and allows us to be here now in celebration together, marking this holy time for all of us.
Good morning. My name is Amy Deloach, and I'm the president of Bnai Israel Synagogue. I want to welcome all of you here this morning, especially the descendants of our founders. I stand here today with immense pride and joy as we gather to celebrate the 125th anniversary of Bnai Israel Synagogue in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's a momentous occasion, and I am deeply honored to welcome y'all all here to this historic celebration. Bnai Israel congregation started as a society on January 6, 1898, by the following 10 men: Nathaniel Jacoby, Jacob S. Eron, Aaron Silverman, Joseph Goldstein, Nathan Paul, Morris Levy, Samuel Rosenthal, David Goldman, Moses Kaminsky, Abraham Goldberg, and Isaac Rotowski. These men came from Eastern Europe to Wilmington, North Carolina to seek a better life. The society was formed as an orthodox, benevolent, religious, and charitable institution. Its purpose was to erect a house of worship, establish and maintain religious schools, to aid its members in distress, and to provide a suitable place for burial of its dead. This purpose is fundamental to who we are today. In the grand view of our synagogue's history, we find ourselves reflecting on how far we've come, starting as an Orthodox community and evolving into the conservative synagogue. From our modest beginnings, meeting in a private home, to the beautiful building we are in today. We have grown, evolved, and thrived. Our journey through time has been marked by resilience from bombings and hurricanes to a unified congregation committed to preserving our cherished traditions, values, and faith. As we look back on the decade of our congregation's existence, we are filled with a sense of gratitude for those who came before us. While preparing for this weekend, we found handwritten documents now displayed in the social hall of members and their weekly dues. Their dedication and sacrifice laid the foundation for the vibrant, close-knit community we have today. Our ancestors' enduring commitment to our synagogue is a testament to the enduring power of faith and community. Though my family did not come to Wilmington until 1922, literally 100 years ago, we are still considered newcomers. I am proud, though, that we have 5 generations of blocks members that have been members at the synagogue. As we celebrate the rich history of Bnai Israel Synagogue, we must also look to the future. The next 125 years hold promise and opportunity. We are excited about the generations yet to come, the new stories to be written, and the continued growth and strength of our congregation within the conservative movement. At Bnai Israel, our progress is deliberate and thoughtful. Within my lifetime, we have gone from women not allowed on the bema to standing today as both rabbi and president. Together, as we stand on the precipice of the future, we reaffirm our commitment to the values that have sustained us: faith, family, and community. With unwavering dedication, we look forward to the journey ahead, knowing that we will continue to shape history, making a difference, and leaving an indelible mark on our beloved synagogue. I was interviewed by a student last week who asked what my Judaism means to me. I responded that Judaism is a way of life. It is at the root of who I am. After, as a wife and mother, it's how I identify most. I explained to her our concept of tikkun olam and our constant pursuit of peace. Explaining this to her overwhelmed me with pride. So let us embrace this remarkable anniversary celebration with hearts full of gratitude and hope. Here's to the past that brought us here, and here's to the future that awaits us. Thank you for being a part of the journey, and may Bnai Israel Synagogue continue to thrive for generations to come.
Amen.
We are having a very casual panel discussion that we've invited 4 people: Mayor Warschauer, Marcia Pearl Schwartz Davis, Henry Lowenstein, and Roselle Margolis. Their families have dated back to the society, and we are very thankful for y'all taking the time to come and talk with us today. Afterwards, if there's anybody else in the congregation that would like to share their family's history, we would love that as well. Rabbi Waxman's going to moderate and start the panel discussion.
Yes. Thank you.
President Amy, you said everything that needs to be said, so I will just say, Zeh hayom asar Adonai nagila v'nismachavo. This is the day that the Lord has made.
let us be glad and rejoice in it. And so, starting us off, Roselle Evanson Margolis of NC State University, and also founder of the Domestic Violence Services here in Wilmington. And we could be here all day. I want to say that the wonderful panel could speak twice as long, 3 times as long as we're going to allow them, but they know they'll speak in a timely manner, and you can ask any questions that you'd like or follow up with them at our delicious gastronomic experience brunch following our panel.
Thank you, Rabbi. I am definitely representing the door. On the list of 1913, I'm related to 6 of those men. 6. In 1898, my great-great-uncle came to Wilmington for the first time. And so I even go back further. And I am representing the Lowenstein, Shane, Evanson, Jaffe, 2 sets of Steins from 2 sides of my family, Goldstein and Goldberg families. I am related to all those people. And our family came from Lithuania, Russia, and England. Yeah, they were the oddballs. And why they came to Wilmington, it was the pogroms, mostly in Russia and Lithuania, and for other reasons. They were brought by family. In 1898, you'll hear more from my cousin Henry. The Lowenstein family belonged to a Landsman group that was encouraged to bring Jewish people, Orthodox Jewish people, to the South. And so that's how our families ended here. David Lowenstein, you will hear a little bit more, brought the Stein family, the Rabunsky Shane family, and there were a lot of Shanes, and then eventually more people as well. They stayed because of family. They found dedication to taking care of their loved ones within the family, whether it be the infirmed or the elderly or just one another. They were patriots. We had Mays, Shane, Steins in the military service from the time they arrived in this country. They had various means of making a living, and I am going to take it forward as far as I know. We were in the dry goods business. We had department stores, 5 and dime stores. We had 5 furniture stores in Wilmington, all related to me. And some were on Castle Street and some were on 4th Street. My grandfather, Rabunsky, had the first moving company with a truck. Before that, it was horse and carriage. And he ran that moving company until his late years. We had several people in the jewelry business. One was on Front Street, and then some of the relatives moved elsewhere with their jewelry businesses. We had dry cleaners. On 4th Street, there's a very popular restaurant now, and it started out as a dry cleaners in the family, and then it became a furniture store in our family. We had relatives in the Atlantic Coastline Railroad. We had clothiers. Anna Goldstein was the oldest living Sally shop owner, and she died at age 100. We had people in private practice in law, and we had legal aid, which I was a part of for 36 years of my life. We had retail operators. I worked at Cape Fear Fair and Expo for a decade. We had consumer researchers. We had caretakers. We had, recently I was at the Visitors Bureau at Wrightsville Beach. There were caterers. My grandmother, Sarah Shane Rabunsky, and many of the people in this room, Goldie Shane Stein, were known as the Jewish caterers of their time. They were really good caterers, and they did wonderful cooking. The day my grandmother died, I said to my mother, who's going to make all these recipes now that she's gone? Because she didn't write down anything. But somehow I've recreated some. And then we had people in insurance, and now we have people in the travel business. Nancy. Who is left in our family in Wilmington? I have my son, Gabriel, who's not a member currently, Steve Stein and Martha Stein, Nancy, and Helene is here today, her mother, and Marion Stein is here today, and Grace Stein, who was married to Leon. More importantly, I want to say, a lot of the women prior to my generation were homemakers or worked in the family business, and that was really important. We contributed to Bnai Israel in service as president, the school system, the board of directors, sisterhood, president, and other roles, men's club, B'nai B'rith, BBYO, Hadassah. My father would come in and change lights on high ladders, and financially we contributed to B'nai Israel. Jerome Shane, when he died, left over $100,000, I believe, to B'nai Israel. And that was totally unexpected because no one expected Jerome to do something like that. And then in the community, we were involved with the Odd Fellows, Rebecca's, Domestic Violence Shelter and Services, Disaster Relief, Hospice, Masons, YWCA, FEMA, the state, United States, particularly in the American Bar Association, and the school system. During the riots, my mother was always in the schools and doing something to make things better. We have attended the following universities, and that's not all of them: North Carolina State University, UNC Chapel Hill, UNCG Women's College, Duke, ECU, Vanderbilt, UNCW, Western North Carolina, Pembroke University, Virginia Commonwealth University, George Washington University, American University, University of Illinois, and the University of Georgia. And I'm sure I have left out some. In Wilmington also remains my Uncle Bernard Rabunski's widow, Lenore, and her son, Stephen. The last remaining Evanson Shane from the last generation before mine is my Aunt Harriet Shane Evanson. My mother and her first cousin married brothers. And she lives in Arlington, not Arlington, Virginia, but she's really in Fairfax, Virginia, in a nursing home at this time. She's 93 years old. We have a lot of cousins and siblings and next generations in North Carolina, Minnesota, Nevada, California, Maryland, Georgia, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, England, and France, just to name a few. I was born in this building. Marion Stein and I were the first named in this building the year it opened. I'm not going to say what year. And we carried the family forward in this building with our education. I was married here. I had my bat mitzvah here. My son was born and circumcised and brought into the synagogue. He had his education here. He had his bar mitzvah here. I experienced all my relatives' deaths, from my great uncle, Dave Lowenstein, to my grandparents, to my parents, to my husband. Through widowhood, I stay in the community because I'm loyal and dedicated to this greater community, plus B'nai Israel.
you're up. If you want to stand, you want to sit. And so you can go up there. It's a very good place. Maira Warschauer's here today. Very proudly, her mother would always proudly say that a graduate of Harvard and Northeastern, right, Conservatory?
New England Conservatory.
New England Conservatory Music, a noted composer, and with us today. And you see, if I would introduce everybody, we'd be here another hour, but we're going to hear comments.
Well, I'm just overwhelmed with Roselle's presentation. What a history. I have three ancestors who have been instrumental in founding Bnai Israel. My great-grandfather, Joseph Goldstein, came to Wilmington in the 1890s. He came from Kovna and first settled in New Jersey. His first wife died there after their first two daughters were born. And then he married Lena K. Becker, and their daughter Rose was born there in New Egypt, New Jersey. And then I'm not sure why they came to Wilmington, but I know it was in the early 1890s because after their daughter Annie was born, my grandmother was born here in 1895. So Joseph was not just straight out of, he was a mature person. He was born probably in the 1840s or around 1850. So he would have been in his 40s by the 1890s.
Put a little closer, move it a little closer.
Is this better? Did you hear anything that I said already? Okay, good. So he was already in his 40s, so he was like a mature person, and Yiddishkeit was extremely important to him. So when he got here, there was not enough people for a minyan, not enough men, and so he, I guess like the Shanes and Lowensteins, he solicited his friends from Kovna. My Aunt Joan said he invited the Kaminsky family and the Abelovitz family. And Kaminsky is listed as one of the Bnai Israel Society, the 1898, that first one, Moses Kaminsky, and then both men or both surnames were found on the 1913 document. I was really happy to learn by reading the minutes from before, up until I think Nathan Schwartz had typewritten all the minutes going back, way back until, from the society all the way up until 1950. And so it was in my parents' documents, so I was reading them last night, and I was happy to see that the services were held in my great-grandfather's home, primarily his home before they moved to the grocery store, above this grocery store on Market Street. So he was a dedicated Torah scholar. He was lucky that his wife, Lena, was a good businesswoman. She ran the store, and he studied. There were various opinions about the separation of the labor in the family, but that was the traditional way from Europe, and that's what he did. My Aunt Joan Warschauer Fox, who now lives in Charleston, she's the youngest of my father's siblings, so her grandfather was Joseph Goldstein as well. And she remembered that he used to stop after services at Bnai Israel. He would stop at the temple and learn with Dr. Rabbi Mendelson. And I read in the minutes that Dr. Rabbi Mendelson was officiating at various activities for the Bnai Israel congregation when there was no rabbi here. So the communities were not as separate as one might think. But when his son Abe was born, the first boy was born in 1898. So when it came time for him to prepare for his bar mitzvah, I guess his father felt he would get a better Jewish education in Savannah. So he dispatched Abe, along with his two older sisters, Annie and Rose, to go to Savannah, and Annie was asked or tasked with opening up a little store. She must have been, well, she was a little older than my grandmother, but not that much older than Abe. She was probably around 13 herself, and so she opened this little store to help support the three of them. I'm not sure how long this arrangement lasts, but I think a couple of years, or at least a certain amount of time. So he came back to his bar mitzvah would have been in 1911, and then synagogue wasn't founded until 1913. So in all, Joseph had 10 children, 2 with his first wife. That was Sadie and Pauline. Sadie became Sadie Silverman and settled in King Street and opened a very prominent store there with her husband, Dave. Pauline was with Sadie at that time. I think Pauline was widowed early. Rose Goldstein Katzoff, and Rose has her daughter, one of her daughters was Vivian Kramer, and I remember my cousins they were in Wallace, and they used to come here to religious school, and my cousin Natalie was very active in the youth organizations. So Muriel, one of their daughters, Muriel Kramer, is now Muriel Kramer Offerman, still lives in Wilmington, and her daughter Sherry is Sherry Opper. So Sherry and Fred Opper are still members here, and their children had their bar and bat mitzvahs here, and so this, I guess, 6 generations there of our family being part of Bnai Israel. And many of the, then there was also, let's see, Annie Goldstein Abrams, and Clara, my daughter Goldstein Warschauer, Abe Goldstein, who was married to Anna May Lowenstein. So that's their Goldstein connection is through Aunt Anna, who married my Uncle Abe, the one who went to Savannah. and Abe's son Ralph later in life became interested in returning to his Jewish roots, and he, with his wife Fran, eventually made Aliyah to Israel. So most of their family is there. Some of the children have come back here. Miriam, their oldest, is Miriam Habibi. Now she lives in Myrtle Beach, and she's in touch with her cousin Dave, who's going to be one of our speakers here today. So then we had Jack Goldstein, he was in Manning, and Helen Goldstein Schechner, and Marcus Goldstein, he and his wife Jeanette had the Wonder Shop, and Isidore Goldstein, who went to King Street to work with Aunt Sadie and Uncle Dave, and his son, Joseph Goldstein, was our prize member of our family. He won a Nobel Prize in medicine for his work on cholesterol. So, yay, Joseph. Another Joseph Goldstein. And speaking of which, there are lots of cousins named after Joseph Goldstein, you can imagine. My Aunt Joan, for example, is named after him. And so is Joyce Schechner, Helen's daughter, and another son, Joseph Goldstein, who was Marcus's son, who was my age, who died in 2007. So the other people on the list in the 2013 are my 2 grandparents, Max Warschauer, my father's father, and Israel Miller, my mother's father. So Max he's listed as in the 1913. So he arrived also from Kovna in 1905 in New York. He had family in California. We believe it was his brother Joseph, his younger brother Joseph, who was in San Francisco along with some other Warschawczyk changed to Warschauer relatives. So he went to California in 1905 to be with his landsman, his family. And then in 1906, there was this historic earthquake in San Francisco. I don't know if you know about this earthquake, but we know about the earthquake because after the earthquake, the Red Cross, there were a lot of homeless people, right? So many buildings were destroyed. So the Red Cross decided to give free bus tickets to anyone who would leave. You could go anywhere in the country. So he came straight to Wilmington. he knew my great-grandfather, Joseph Goldstein, and by then Joseph Goldstein had some daughters of marriageable age, and it was time for Max to look for a wife. So they first thought Sadie would be the one. She was beautiful and very elegant. However, Sadie was in love with someone else. She didn't end up marrying the someone else, but at that time she refused Max. And so he saw my grandmother, Clara, and he thought he would wait for her. So he waited. I think she was 18 when they got married. I know she was 19 when my father was born in 1914. And Max was 14 years older than she was, so they started their family. My father, Dr. Sam Warshauer, who practiced in Wilmington for years and years. Many of you may remember him. And then there was a daughter, Norma. And Norma had cystic fibrosis, and she died when she was 3. And I'll tell you more about her burial in a minute. But then there was an Uncle Bernard Warshauer, Uncle Albert Warshauer. Albert's son, Leo, is a doctor here, Dr. Leo Warshauer. And then Joan, who lives in Charleston. So Max was very active in this Bnai Israel affairs. He was treasurer, financial secretary, and recording secretary. He was a trustee and a treasurer again between 1910 and 1926. And he was apparently a successful businessman. Actually, I remember the store because Malcolm Bernard used to run the store, Carolina Dry Goods, when I was a little girl, even after his father died. And it was a wholesale distributor, so he kind of had a knack for seeing the business. And he was also a good home designer. He designed his own home, which is on 10th Street. I forget the intersection, but we saw it on the tour. You can take a tour, about Israel, Wilmington in color, and it talks about the historical buildings in the Black community. And our family did a tour this summer, and we got to see my grandfather's home. That's where my father was born. And we had a home in Riceville Beach because my Aunt Joan had asthma, so they built a home in Riceville Beach, and my grandfather designed that. And my father remembers him loving being at the beach and going for a swim every day after work in the summer. My father continued that tradition when we would spend a month at the beach at that house. So unfortunately, in 1930, Max resigned from Bnai Israel. According to the minutes, it had to do with disagreement about the cemetery. And from our family's knowledge, it had to do with Norma, because Norma died when she was 3, and apparently they weren't allowed to put her in a burial spot along with other people. She had to go off in the side, and one time I was visiting the cemetery and I noticed her grave off to the side. There's a plaque or a tombstone in the other cemetery where most of our family is buried, but that was a source of, issue for the family. So it was my grandmother probably couldn't handle it. Max died in 1949, 2 weeks before I was born. So they were hoping that I would be a boy, and they would name me Max. But lo and behold, I was a girl, so they named me Maxine. And when I decided I wanted to go by a Hebrew name, his name was Meir, so I took Meira. And my middle name is Miller, which leads me to my other grandfather, Israel Miller. He was called Miller. His wife called him Miller. Everybody called him Miller. And I didn't realize until last night I was writing this up that I was named Maxine Miller with both of my grandfathers right there prominently. So now I go by Meira Miller, but Maxine is still my legal name. You can give names. His name is wrong in the journal. Somebody, it's a lot of names to copy. They copied him as Isaac Miller, but it's really Miller stands for Israel Miller. So that's just Israel Miller is on this plaque. So he arrived in Wilmington maybe around 1912, because that's when he's listed as one of the donors for this new synagogue, and he's on the plaque in front of me. And my mother says that when he first came to the U.S., he went to New York, And he wanted to go someplace smaller, maybe because of this organization that Roselle mentioned. But he made his way to Wilmington, and he just asked around to the Jewish merchants, the Jewish men, do you think I can make a living here? And they all said, oh, no, it's very hard. You shouldn't come here. Maybe they didn't want the competition. I don't know. But they were not like really saying, yeah, come on down. But the last person he talked to said, yeah, you know what? Everybody else here is making it, so why don't you just come too? You could probably do it too. So he came, he was a peddler, and he made enough money to maybe open a little store, and then he wanted to get married, so he went to New York. He found Sarah Borowski, who loved living in New York, but she was getting a little up in the years, and it was time for her to settle down, so she came to Wilmington, and my mother was born in 1916. And then her younger sister, Lucille, was born in 1920. So let's see, I can skip some of these things. Two other uncles, Jake Miller is one of the, what was Jake? He shows up in 1917 as a dues-paying member. And then another uncle, Bill Borowski, lived with the family, and he's listed as a new member in 1922. So Israel Miller was a businessman. He had a post office in his store, like one of those substations, and he loved. And he later moved to on North 4th Street. Everybody had stores on 4th Street. Then he moved to South Front Street, and that store is still there. And my cousin Gerald Miller was operating it for a long time with merchandise that we don't really love. He liked to sell guns, I'll just say that. So, but there was a historic marker in front of that store. And he was a very, very sweet guy, Gerald. And my mother, I think she got her love for music from her father. He bought a phonograph, and they played classical music a lot of the time in the house. Her father took her to her violin lessons, and my mother's, I probably get the music from that side of the family. My mother's proudest day, I just have to say one thing, was when she graduated from high school. She knew that she was the valedictorian. She was going to receive the Amy Bradley Medal. She did not tell her parents. So they go to the high school graduation, and they have the surprise of their lives that their daughter, Miriam, these are two immigrants. First generation Miriam is the top of the class, and Sarah Miller died 2 years later. My mother was at Women's College. She offered to come back, and her father said, no, you must go back and continue. So her sister Lucille helped take care of her father. So my mother, Miriam Miller, eventually, after she graduated college, she eventually came back to Wilmington, and she started going out with my father, Sam Warschauer, and he proposed to her right before he was going overseas to go to the South Pacific as a doctor in the Army. And she was making her way back from there when she got word that her father had died. And so she and Aunt Lucille ran the store, selling jeans and other work clothes to and other material to the soldiers who were at Camp Davis. And Aunt Lucille actually met her husband in Camp Davis. So just to bring it up to the present, I loved coming here as a child, even though I was brought up in the temple. I came for probably Marvin Newworth's bar mitzvah, probably Johnny Alper's bar mitzvah, and probably Steve Stein's bar mitzvah, and people who are here now. And I loved just hearing the traditional melodies. And as a matter of fact, when I became a composer, I wrote a Shacharit service that's based on the traditional melodies, which I first heard right here in this room. And my husband and I are members of Beth Shalom in Columbia, South Carolina, and we were here yesterday. We've been here a lot, but yesterday we just felt, both of us felt so at home here with the service, and the rabbi and everyone made me feel so welcome and gave me an aliyah, which would never have happened when I was a little girl, right? But growing up, but it was very meaningful to be here, and I appreciate so much that. Bnai Israel's been here, supporting Yiddishkeit in Wilmington, and that we can celebrate this wonderful anniversary. I do have some CDs with me if you want to look at them. There's a shofar concerto, the shacharit, and other things, but just happy that our family was encouraged to come and that Yiddishkeit could flourish here in Wilmington. Thank you.
So we heard a lot of names and information. I hope the panel will be preparing your documents in whatever Nancy says, PDF form or whatever, hard copies, so that we have them we'll have them in our archives to add to our wonderful archives. And Dr. Marcia Schwartz Davis is with us. She's an educator on the staff of NC State University.
Hi. For so many reasons and memories, I was honored to be able to share a few words at the 125th anniversary of Bnai Israel Synagogue. Both my grandfather, Louis Schwartz, and my husband's grandfather, Morris Davis, are on that 1913 document you see in front of you as one of the 10 members at that time, the 10 founders of the time. My husband, Mark, and I were not even aware of our unique connection to Bnai Israel when we met at UNC in the 80s, but were told many, many times before our wedding, which was co-officiated by Bnai Israel's own Rabbi Waxman. So as I look around this space today, I'm again struck with how four corners of a building can mean so much as a foundation of for my family and values. My grandfather, who served as a first president of this shul, ensured that the original building carried on the traditions of the old country with a mikveh and upstairs seating for women. This 1954 building in which we currently sit contains the actual cornerstone of the original building in the Minyan Room, which was donated by my father and his three brothers in honor of their parents. My father told me stories of the childhood awkwardness and teenage angst of housing the rabbis who served as the teachers of the cheder he attended Monday through Thursday for several hours after school. I too remember this synagogue as a foundation of my childhood. My father and his three brothers sat in a rectangle in the first two rows of separate seating, forming their own physical version of famed UNC basketball coaches Dean Smith's four corners. I've been told they spread out in this fashion so that their father, Louis, would not appear boastful sitting next to his four sons. My father and uncles struggled to get a minyan on Shabbos mornings and keep the rhythms of Jewish life alive. My father would go so far as to even bribe male congregants to attend Saturday morning minyans with promises of wholesale furniture orders. All of my senses recall these days. I can still hear the phone calls to gather yearly minyans to commemorate the yahrzeits of my grandfathers and grandmother. I can still smell the wonderful large family meals after high holiday and Passover services at this shul. I can still hear the speaker at the yearly United Jewish Appeal event housed at this shul, followed by a delicious dinner cooked by Edith Alper and her team. It raised funds for Israel and Jews in need throughout the world, and my maternal grandmother would sometimes even fly in from New York to help ensure that adequate funds were raised. Just as my father and uncles served in various leadership roles to keep this synagogue strong, my mother and aunts did the same in the sisterhood. My Aunt Louise provided the food for a weekly Saturday morning kiddush for years and years at a time when finding kosher food in Wilmington was very challenging. This commitment and sacrifice have greatly impacted my sister, brother, and myself. My sister has spent years in leadership roles for her federation, previously UJA, and leading interfaith missions to Israel. My brother is very involved in the Jewish day school his children attend and has recently ended his term as president of his Orthodox synagogue. Currently, 2 of his children and 1 of their spouses are active in the IDF, while an additional child is volunteering as a firefighter in Jerusalem. My own family is heavily involved in our Orthodox shul. And unfortunately, it is now our turn to send emails for yahrzeit minions to lovingly remember our parents. Throughout it all, I see the four corners of this shul as scaffolding and supporting our lives. I see them when my husband, son, and nephews don their tefillin, and my daughter and nieces light Shabbos candles. I see the four corners of this synagogue when my cousin Brenda Mitwell and her lovely family, who's all in this row, join my family for Rosh Hashanah dinner, all of us benching together in gratitude after the meal. I see the four corners of this synagogue when my brother wears my grandfather's kittel for the traditional Seder that begins an hour after sunset and goes well into the evening. And I saw those same four corners rebuilt when he passed this tattered garment on to his son under a beautiful Jerusalem chuppah mere weeks ago. The four corners of Bnai Israel have created a foundation of traditional Judaism that will hopefully continue in vibrant warmth for generations to come.
So I want to thank Marcia for the introduction of the Four Corners, because as many of you know, I would give the Four Corners sermon on the Shabbat Hagadol, always to talk about the Four Corners. Well, before we hear from Henry Lowenstein, let me just say a few things. I'm going to be a little more philosophical and talk about education, truth and philosophy, Nusach America, and women's role here at Bnai Israel. Back in the day, we had 5 or 6 classes on Sunday morning. High school students taught our kindergarten and first graders. And we have some teachers, and I'm not going to mention all the teachers. I don't have all the names. Rosalind Lazar, Gail Ginsberg, Linda Killian, Tracy Fleischman, active as a teacher and chair of our education committee. Other teachers, Jeanette Evanson, Z. Wrightblatt, Roselle Margolis, Marilyn Winter, Sammy Winter, Dan Waxman, and our teachers had their specialists, Rebecca Tobias, Barbara Waxman, Sue Mincis, Joel Mincis, Jay Kapner, and many others. I tried to teach a rational, conservative Judaism approach to Jewish life, and indeed sometimes slanted towards a little Reconstructionism. The point is that our students, I knew, would attend good schools, and that parents would try to teach their children to employ critical, ethical, and critical teaching and critical thinking. And so if we taught myths and bobamaises and fairy tales to our young children, they would indeed abandon Judaism when they would encounter science and education on a higher level. And so an example would be that Judaism teaches truth and not facts. The world was not necessarily created in just 6 days, maybe 6 million years, 6 billion years. And for sure, more than 5,784 years old. That, of course, is a religious counting. We can study Darwin and cosmology. And Hanukkah will be here soon, and the questions were always asked. The question is, are we ready with the answers? Did the small flask of oil burn 24/7 for 8 days? And maybe not. Maybe they gathered at sunset time for a short ceremony that made the oil last for a week. And why for 8 days anyway? Because of Sukkot, that they didn't observe a couple months ago. And maybe the Maccabees didn't conquer and liberate all of Jerusalem. Maybe it was just the Temple Mount and the adjacent area. And when it came to Passover, we know the 10 plagues. We don't know how long they took, but it wasn't just in 10 days or 10 months. But these events happened, and they were incorporated in our story. And the number that the Torah gives of 600,000 men and 600,000 women, that would be like 1 million people. We're going to have trouble herding all of you from this room into the other room, and that's a short, straight walk. And then when it came to Shavuot, we talked about what happened at Mount Sinai, and did we get the whole Torah there or not? And in front of you, you have the Eitz Chaim Chumash. And I'd like to direct your attention sometimes when you come on a Shabbat morning or Friday night to look at the last 100 pages. Look at those faces over here. Anyway, the last 100 pages of the Eitz Chaim is probably, some people thought, was the best part of the whole book because of those essays written by leading conservative scholars. And it tells the conservative movement philosophy of who wrote the Torah. I learned it when I was in high school, the Torah written by our friends J.E.P. and D and edited by R, the redactor. And so when I learned that, that was life-changing. And that's not what you teach 5-year-olds, it's what you teach the 15-year-olds before we send them off to college. And Nusach America. Well, one other, I did mention the other night about our microphones here. When I came, everyone said, oh, you can't really have a microphone because you can't turn it on Shabbat, so we had other people turn it on Shabbat. But this is a large room. I couldn't yell and sing over all the people davening, so that was one thing. And we talk about the Sunday school and some of the activities, thinking about our summer day camp that we had that was enjoyed by many from 8:45 in the morning to 1, that quickly included the Shabbat Eve service, and then it included a Wednesday night sleepover and a magic show. And how about those boat trips to Masonboro Island for Tashlich, when we sort of pretended we were going to go to Israel, or how it would feel to land at Masonboro Island as immigrants, or how it felt to go to the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island. And how about tubing down the Black River? We're glad we survived it because there were snakes in the trees and everyone thought they were going to die because of the snakes over there. But we were told that it was an okay thing to do. And Joe Reitblad had to design and expand our sukkah when we had 40 or 50 or 60 people for dinner in the sukkah. And the high school graduation service that we had for many years with a guest speaker from the community and with a cake that had the logos of the various colleges that the students were going to attend. And we talked a lot about 1898. We must mention 1898 because 100 years later, at 1998, I was the co-chair with John Battle for the memorial program to commemorate the 100th anniversary. And we walked from St. Luke's Church to Thalion Hall, where we told the story of what happened, the only coup d'etat in American political history. And then we walked down Fifth Street to the 1898 memorial. Nusach America is the musical term given in the 60s or 70s. And I attended the Conference for the Advancement of Jewish Education many times. I urged our students to go, our teachers to go. I sang with Debbie Friedman in her cage chorale. I heard and got to know many performers that we later, with the help of Jay Kapner, bring to Bnai Israel, of Doug Cutler and Joe Black, Sam Glazer, Julie Silver, Lenny Solomon, and we had Craig Taubman perform Friday Night Live on the stage, and we welcomed Jared Taney as the block professor of Jewish history at UNCW when we brought Rick Recht here. Nusach America is the style of music that incorporates Hebrew and English in the same song, like when we say Lechi Lach, to a place that I will show you, or Misha Berach, or Lador Vador, that we're going to sing at the end of today's ceremony from generation to generation. Or the song that we like, Journey, by Craig Taubman, a favorite of mine and Larry Zimmerman's that says the whole world is a narrow bridge, a gesher tsar ma'od. And Heal Us Now, the hit song brought to us by Carl Samet during the recent high holiday season. And as we had our Wilmington premiere of Ahavat Olam that we did Friday night, when we say, when you lie down and we rise up, English and Hebrew incorporated in the same song. As I mentioned Friday night, I hope that everyone appreciates the wonderful new musical selections that our cantoral soloist Carl Samet brought to us during the recent High Holy Day season, as Carl prepared for us MP3 files so that the group in the front could learn their various parts better and efficiently. And Rabbi Bender did an excellent job and does an excellent job of pulpit management so that we had very meaningful services on the recent high holiday season. And we expect that Rabbi Bender will continue to bring us the next generation of Jewish rock and roll hits. And in conclusion, part 3 of my comments, the role of women in Judaism. When I was hired in 1981, I was as an agent of change. They had been 18 months without a rabbi. And so it was now time that some of people here, some of your parents stood up and said, this is enough, it is time. Rabbi Waxman's a young guy, he's got a young family. It's time to move on and get this done. Not like in Washington where it went on to find a speaker, so many ballots, and they did have other candidates as someone did sign a contract, but I think he decided not to come August the 1st because it just wasn't, he didn't show up, and that was it. So they had to open the search again. And so here at Bnai Israel, women went from the back rows to the bima, to the presidency and the rabbinate. And in 1981, there were no women serving on the board of directors, much less an officer or president. It was going to be a long and winding road filled with many potholes and tears to get to Amy Deloche and Rabbi Bender. And when I came here in 1981, in the past century, I was told that, Rabbi, you know that girls can't lead the Kaddish or be called to the Torah. And I said at that time that this is 1981, not 1881. And history happens. It is not always remembered, but on days like this, we do remember and we do think about how we got here today. Now is one of those moments. And when we have a bat mitzvah, when women are called to the Torah, when Sisterhood Shabbat takes place and women do every word of the Shabbat morning service, we are standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. And there were individuals who were instrumental in making this happen. David and Arlene Burns, Joel and Sue Mincis, Jay and Lee Kapner, and we remember Arlene and Joel and Jay Zichronam Livracha. Their memories live on. And there were others who were active in this process, Barbara Waxman and Roselle Margolis, Anita Liebeskin, and many others who were involved. This changed the character of Bnai Israel. They plotted and planned, wrote the motions, and got the votes out. And as I said, there were plenty of tears along the way, tears of frustration and insults. They were told, if you want an egalitarian synagogue, why not go to the temple? We're all fine here. And there were comments made in ignorance and in sexism. And it was not going to be an easy process. At times, the cup was half full, but the majority persevered. The bat mitzvah of Drew Burns was held in Pender County at a friend's house with a Torah borrowed from our sister congregation in Whiteville. And that Shabbat Mincha celebration was full of tears of joy. And then Tamar Kapner, her bat mitzvah was held in the building, but in the auditorium. Lee and her grandmother, Tamara, and Lee, her mother, and grandmother, Jean Green, were considered unfit to be on our pulpit here. And the service was a wonderful mincha service. But the Talmudic principle of Ma Yomru Hagoyim came into play. The Talmudic principle means, what do non-Jews say about this? And there were plenty of non-Jews here that night. All the guests who were here that night in the auditorium said, what the heck are you doing in the auditorium when you have a lovely room over there that's empty? And that answer that girls and women could not be called to this pulpit was weak and did not resonate. And so that was it. The Bnai Israel old-timers heard the comments of their friends of the greater Wilmington community. And a battle was won, a battle, not the total war. A battle was won, and it was time for change. And Aaron Minsis celebrated his bar mitzvah here in this room at a Shabbat mincha service. Aaron's grandparents, Robert and Helen Solomon, were called for the first honor. Joel and Sue were called for the second honor. Aaron was called for the third honor. It was in this room history was made. There was no turning back. And so I much mentioned that then we went to the egalitarian service. It was called the E-service. It was sort of a learner's service, a learner's minyan. It was a bridge from the 8:30 service to the egalitarian way of life. And once a month, we had the 11 o'clock service with a little kiddush, some study. We studied the structure of the service. And most important, it was an opportunity for women and the girls to be called up for a liot, to be gabbais, to practice rapping the Torah, to see what it was like. And there were tears of joy when women would say, this is the first time I touched the Torah. This is the first time I had an aliyah. And so then we come to Leah Eisenstein. And Caroline and Buddy are here with us in the back today. And their daughter Leah had the first Shabbat morning aliyah bat mitzvah at 11 o'clock. It would be a decade before we would then have what we for Saturday morning. And so in conclusion, it would be years, as I said, before we would have the egalitarian Shabbat service. Gradually, women elected to the board. They did a good job. Imagine that. And then they became officers and president today. And now I turn it over to Professor Dr. Henry Lowenstein, who's going to talk for a few minutes he's going to talk about his role and his life here at Bnai Israel.
Well, thank you all for inviting us, and my wife, Carla Grabert Lowenstein. And you know the name David Lowenstein, who was my great-grandfather. I'm the oldest of the great-grandchildren, of the great-grandsons of David. There is a granddaughter who's 2 years older than the great-granddaughter. I knew very little growing up about Wilmington other than we were here. And so to give you a little background why we're here is that my late uncle, Ralph Lowenstein, who was the Dean Emeritus of the University of Florida, and Arnold Lowenstein, who was, both of them were David's grandsons, were the family historians, and we're going to put together the family history. They both died in 2020. And so my oldest uncle, who's still with us, Jerry Lowenstein, called me up and said, you're the family historian now. And the family got on my case. Look, you have a PhD, you've written books, you've written 144 peer-reviewed journal articles, you can write this. Aye. So I said, I'll do it when I retired. So I retired from Coastal Carolina University. I had been at other universities. And so the first thing Carla said is, well, let's go to Wilmington and see where the family was from. So I looked up the Bnai Israel and where the cemetery was where my great-grandfather was buried, and I called the person in charge of the cemetery, Steve Stein, who informed me, I'm your cousin. And we'll invite Roselle Margolis over. And this is when I began to discover the whole labyrinth of Shanes and the famous, some of you may have seen it, I had in service because it's like a scorecard, the family tree of the Shanes that Edwin Shane put together. But you've heard a lot about people here. I thought I'd take a minute and tell you where you were from, because it's important. And as I've said, I've traced this family history back to the 5th century, and we won't go back that far. But most of the people of this congregation and David Lowenstein came from Lithuania. Now, Lithuania was part, if you go back, was originally called the Commonwealth of Poland-Lithuania. It was a commonwealth. It was 2 duchies. Think of it as 2 states. And Poland became Catholic very easily, and Lithuania didn't adopt Christianity until almost the 1500s. And the Lithuanian kings were very interested in and very supportive of Jews. And so the more anti-Semitic the Poles became, the more Jews, they brought Jews into Lithuania. In fact, the king of Lithuania in 1435, I told Roselle this, made it a felony to throw a rock at a synagogue. Think of that, 1400s. By the time of the 1800s, when most of your great-great-great-grandparents were there were 3.2 million Jews in Lithuania, mostly in Vilnius. Kovno you heard about. I was, in my history, just to show you Kovno, where your family's from, my family was from, the Shanes. I'll explain the Lowenstein in a minute, but the family name was all Shane. I'll explain Lowenstein in a minute. But Kovno, just to give you an idea, had 40 synagogues, 5 daily Yiddish newspapers, 100 Jewish organizations and yeshivas in one town, about the size of Wilmington. Okay? And so you're familiar with your Jewish history. The Vilna Gaon was there. The first Talmud printed on a printing press was there. The Baal Shem Tov, who was the Hasidic movement, was there. And actually, we have gone back, only 2 of us have ever gone back to Lithuania to look at it. You did good. Arnold Lowenstein did and I did, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So why did we get here? 3 million people. Napoleon comes through in 1812 to Vilna and proclaims it's the Jerusalem of Europe. He's so impressed. Well, it is because of Napoleon, because Napoleon was taking down the royalty in Europe, including after the Tsar. He tried to take Moscow and was defeated. And guess who the Jews supported all through Europe? Napoleon, because he was breaking down the ghettos. So when Napoleon is defeated in 1813, who comes into the vacuum? The Tsar. And that is when the oppression starts of the Jews in Russia. You had some czars that were very bad, some that tried to liberalize. The one who tried to liberalize the most was Alexander II. And the royalty despised him so much for that because he was actually starting to break down some anti-Jewish laws that they assassinated. 1868. And of course, guess who they blamed for the assassination? Not the royalty who plotted it, but the Jews. This continued on with his son and others. Fast forward, 1897. You talk about 1898 here. To know 1898, you got to know 1897. The worst pogrom in the history of Lithuania took place in 1897. It was called the Great Pogrom of Vilna. I use the word Vilna. It's Vilnius is the capital city of Lithuania today, but it was then known as Vilna. Now, I grew up studying Jewish history, and pogroms were just like studying history. There were no pictures really and everything. If you want to see what a pogrom was, all you had to do was October 7th, because that's exactly what happened in Vilna. Almost the same amount of people were killed. Jacob Shane, who is the David Lowenstein's father all the other Shanes, shows he died in 1897. Was it from the pogrom? We don't know. But what we do know is that within 12 months, Joe Lowenstein, you heard about Anna Goldstein, Lowenstein-Goldstein, Joe Lowenstein and David Lowenstein, before then they were named Shane, said the family's got to get out. And here's how we get Lowenstein. To get out of Lithuania, Russian-dominated, you had to have a visa to exit. Most of us travel internationally. You have to have a visa to go in. You had to have a visa to exit. And the Russians wouldn't let Jews out. So how did they get out? They bought letters of transit, just like in Casablanca. Every time I think of Casablanca, watch Casablanca, remember the letters of transit with Humphrey Bogart and all that, Peter Lorre and all that? That's what the Lowensteins had. They bought letters of transit in the name of Lowenstein. I'll pronounce it properly. Löwenstein, had the umlaut over it. Löwenstein was a wealthy, royal family, Catholic family in the southwest of Germany. There is still a town there, Löwenstein. People think it's a Jewish name. It's a Catholic name. And there are many Lowenstein Catholics I know in New York and all. That had nothing to do with us. And so many ancestors, I know, met other Lowensteins that they came over with letters of transit that way. All right, so they had the letters of transit. So what did they do? They came to America to set up a business because they found out, these were very smart people, by the way. Those of you may have known, David Lowenstein was considered brilliant, spoke 7 foreign languages. One of my cousins who remembered as a child when he was in his 90s, he could still have a conversation with him in French. He spoke Russian, Lithuanian, Yiddish, German, French, and of course English. All right, so they plotted this movement here. Now, how did they get to Wilmington? This is one of the little hazy things in the history because there's no documentation. One family story is that the ship they were on from Germany, from Hamburg, was supposed to land at the port of Philadelphia. A storm occurred in the Atlantic and it was diverted to Wilmington. They got off and they said they liked it here and stayed. The other thing I find, as Roselle said, is you had Jewish agencies that were working to get Jews out of Russia, in particular, Russia, whether it was Latvia, Lithuania, Belarusia, and so forth. And so they would be settling Jews in targeted areas of the South that needed people. So my maternal ancestors came from Lithuania through part of Baltimore, and they were settled in Newport News, Virginia. Later came up to Richmond. My grandmother, my mother's mother, her father was actually one of the 300,000 Jews that Baron de Hirsch, a very wealthy Jewish German philanthropist, paid the Tsar in gold millions of dollars to transport 300,000 Jews from Eastern Europe, from mainly Belorussia, to Argentina. Because Argentina had a massive plague, and they were short of people, period. Educated people. That's how you still have Jewish cowboys in Argentina. They all so my part of my family is Argentinian. It's from the Argentina. So we think that's another reason. So when I'm writing the family history, I'm reminded of one of the famous newspaper editors that said, when there's difference between the facts and the legend, publish the legend. But I'm going to put both in the history, and then people can decide what they are. Okay, fast forward here. What did they do? They came about somewhere between 1898 and 1899 after that pogrom, and they set up a dressmaking business somewhere around 4th Street. In Lithuania, they were tailors. One of the reasons they knew a lot of people in the Russian government that could get around is they made uniforms. The Shanes were in the uniform business, and they made uniforms for the Tsar's army, for the police, for Romania, Latvia, some of the others. and so they would tailor. So they set up this business here. It was a dressmaking business. And U.S. immigration law said you could only come in if you could prove that you had support and you weren't going to be a ward of the state. So the Lowensteins were the sponsors for every one of the Shanes that got brought over. Now, they came over here, between the last Shane came over, Celia Shane, was David's sister and daughter, came over in 1912. That was the last of them. So David had to, and Joe had to work, get enough money to bring bring the families in. So they were here alone at first. So David Lowenstein's family, Sophie Lowenstein, and the three boys, my Uncle Jake, my grandfather Henry, and Harry Lowenstein, came over. The three girls were born here in Wilmington. And they came over in 1901. And the immigration records were lost, interestingly, in 1942, because my uncle was going to be in a top secret project known as the Manhattan Project. My grandfather had to petition the Department of Justice to show he was a citizen, because with the papers, when your ancestors came in, they didn't say Lithuania. They'd say Vilna, Russia. And Russia were communist at the time and so forth. So we know they got their citizenship in 1907. Now, Amy told me to tell a couple of Lowenstein Wilmington stories, which I will. The nascent community of these Lithuanian Orthodox Jews kept kosher. And here they are in the middle of Wilmington, Goyish land with pork and, pulled pork sandwiches and all of that, right? So they were very reticent about the food. So Sophie Lowenstein, had a stable behind her house and had milk cows. In our family, it's called the kosher cow story. And Harry Lowenstein, her son, would tell it. And she provided all the milk for this Jewish community for a period of years until the people got used to felt that the milk, the dairies in Wilmington were okay. She also raised chickens, and she supplied the person, whoever was the shofet, so they could butcher the chickens kosher. So the early kosher food were the Lowensteins here in now. The reason you don't see the Lowensteins back as much is in 1914, Sophie got malaria, which doctors at the time thought was from bad air. So they told David, take her and the children up to clean air in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and they went to Roanoke, Virginia. And they were in Roanoke, Virginia for 10 years. David stayed here with your congregation, and he would shuttle times he could into Roanoke. And by the time she got better, 10 years later, the boys were adults. They had worked odd jobs, and Roanoke was a Jewish community. There's the jewelry pawn shop there, Schlossberg. Ike Lowenstein, one of the sons, married the daughter, so he stayed there. Jake and Henry went to Danville, Virginia, which is where I was born, with big textile, tobacco industry, and so forth, and set up a jewelry store. Harry Lowenstein became the first of our family to go to college. In 1920, he was an athlete at Roanoke High School and went on a scholarship to Virginia Polytech Institute, majored in engineering, and then in 1923, think of this, got a master's degree at the Colorado School of Mines and could not get a job anywhere. After World War I, industry's booming. Coal industry in Virginia is booming. Petroleum, not one of them would hire a Jew. And this legacy was so severe with the family because David had taken some of the money he earned here and the children to put Harry through, that when my father in 1946 went to University of Virginia and wanted to major in engineering, my grandfather said, if you major in engineering, I'll cut you off. And he never did. And it wasn't until my brother, youngest brother, graduated George Mason University in electrical engineering in 1990 or so, that another Lowenstein got an engineering degree, and he's had a good career. Now, another story to tell you, because I don't want to keep you too long. Some of you went on the tour of the cemetery. And if you go by the Lowenstein grave and you very carefully look, you're going to notice something strange. Grandma Sophie died in 1945, and her tombstone is appropriately spelled Lowenstein. David died in 1960, and his tombstone is spelled Loewenstein. Why is that? Steve asked me, why is that? None of you know, so I will tell you the story once and for all. My Uncle Jake, one of the things in the Lowenstein family that's a trait, sometimes not very good trait, is that they're very tight with money, shall we say cheap. David Lowenstein had that, by the way, David Lowenstein, in fact, it killed him. David Lowenstein had asthma. In 1960, they were coming out with some new asthma medications. He went to the doctor. Doctor gave him a prescription. He went to the local pharmacy in Wilmington, thought the price was too high. When the doctor sent the bill, he put the prescription in the bill, sent it back to the doctor with no payment, saying, and a note, I didn't use it. On April 16, 1960, 10 days after Passover, he was visiting his daughter, Helen Lowenstein Flegel, in Charlotte, had a massive asthma attack and died. Jacob Lowenstein, my Uncle Jake is the oldest, naturally was in charge of the funeral and everything. And when he came here, the stonemason had misspelled David Lowenstein's name on the tombstone. The stonemason apologized, told Jake, he'll fix it, but he needed some money for materials. Jake said no. And forever, my great-grandfather's tombstone in your cemetery is misspelled. Now, there is actually an epilogue to this story. Jake Lowenstein Jake Lowenstein was visiting his sister, Helen Lowenstein Flegel in Charlotte in 1983. And guess what? He died at the dinner table. My aunts used to joke that, staying at her house was fatal if you came to visit. Anyway, so he's buried in H. Chaim Cemetery in Danville, Virginia. My Uncle Ralph goes up. Guess what? The stonemason in Danville has misspelled Jake Lowenstein's footstone with the same misspelling. Ralph took money out of his own pocket and had it replaced, and so at least Jake's Lowenstein is spelled properly, but David's forever is misspelled, and that's the story that you have there. There are 104 direct descendants of David and Sophie Lowenstein, and I've now contacted almost every one of them. Just in that particular family, because there were 4 boys, 3 girls, I've connected all of them. Just in the immediate family, to give you an idea, again, my grandfather was the second son. Jake Lowenstein had no children. Henry Lowenstein, my grandfather, married Rachel Berman in Danville. Jake married his sister. So 2 brothers married 2 sisters. And some of these inner things in this family seem to be there. The Shanes know about Ike Lowenstein marrying his first cousin, which apparently at one time that she was underage at the time she did that. And we've not known too much about that, but my wife spent a career in California prosecuting those kind of things. Anyway, I have had the 3, I'll just tell you briefly of the 3. My father was in the furniture business. You hear about furniture business in this family? There's another one. But the oldest, Jerry Lowenstein, in World War II, was recruited by the Navy in a special program through MIT and got a degree in physics. And in the Navy, was stationed in New Mexico at a place called Los Alamos. He is one of the persons who worked on the atomic bomb during World War II. Got a degree in medicine from Columbia and is one of the founders of nuclear medicine. So if you've ever had a nuclear heart angiogram, or a height exam for your gallbladder like I had, he invented it in 1950s. And he is still with us today. He's 97 years old, And he teaches a course at University of California at the History of Science, which I joke with him, you are the history of science. The youngest, Ralph Lowenstein, very well known, was the Dean of Journalism at the University of Florida. In 1948, to the consternation of his parents, snuck over to Israel and fought in the Haganah. And he fought in a unit called the Machal unit, which is a Hebrew word meaning outsiders. And that unit was all the volunteers from English-speaking countries. So his unit had Jews from England, from Canada, South Africa, and the United States. He later wrote the history of it. So he talked about the family historian, in which he has been awarded Israel. He was awarded Israel's equivalent of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. If you ever go to Israel, going to Jerusalem, you'll see there's an exit for the Machal Memorial. He's responsible for that. And so, you know, that's the kind of family I come from. And it all came from David Lowenstein. And so we're happy to be that part for you. Thank you.
Someone's alarm. So I'm sure that many people have many questions, but we'll reserve that for after you've had some bagels. So feel free to ask all the questions you want. Make sure that our wonderful presenters have had a chance to have a snack at least, because I'm sure from sharing all these histories, they've worked up an appetite themselves. But certainly we are beyond thrilled to have been joined by our wonderful panelists and everyone this entire weekend. You'll notice when you go out to the next room that we have these beautiful historical booklets. We invite you to take one per family. There's 2 on each table, but a couple are set off to the side as well, so please take one per family and look through and look more at our history, see some of our current pictures, and there's a lot of beautiful things to be found in here. Any other final words? So like I said a couple times before, but I'll say it again, I look forward to I guess from heaven at the time, looking down 5 generations from now to hear all the stories that will be told by our descendants for the 250th anniversary. So may God bless and keep us all. May God deal kindly and graciously with all of us. May God show you favor and grant you peace. Yivrecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ye'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka, Yisanai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. From generation to generation, Lador Vador.
We are gifts and we are blessings. We are history in song. We are hope and we are healing. We are learning to be strong.
We are words and we are stories. We are pictures of the past. We are carriers of wisdom, not the first and not the last.
L'dor vador nagi God lecha. L'dor vador we protect this chain. From generation to generation. L'dor vador these lips will praise your name. Looking back on the journey that we carry in our heart, from the shadow of the mountain to the waters that would part.
We are blessed and we are holy. We are children of your way. And the words that bring
we protect this chain from generation to generation. Ledor vador, these lips will praise your name.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Go make a best friend and go have some delicious food and continue to celebrate.
I will send you the book for the congregation library. That's the draft. I got to do this. It's 34,000 words. It's like another document.